Hey guys, my name is Iasmina and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I thought it would be nice to give you some recommendations for books to read around Christmas time or during December. Sort of like cozy Christmas reads that you can enjoy, you know, while slouching on the couch with a lit candle and maybe a nice cup of hot chocolate or tea or the beverage of your choice, and with a Christmas tree twinkling in the background. I have a lot of books to get through, so let's just get straight to it. So the first category of books I want to recommend is maybe a bit more personal to each individual. So I'll show you my recommendations, obviously, but these might be different books to you. So the first category is rereading comfort books. So books that you've read many times before, books that you really love and that you've thought about rereading for a long time, but you never really, you know, took the time to actually sit down and read them. I think, especially during Christmas time, it's a bit more relaxed maybe, and it just seems nicer to reread a favorite book of yours. Something that is comfortable, something that you don't have to, you know, analyze too much, or because you already know the story, you already know everything that happens and you love everything that happens. I'll give you a few of my personal examples. Of course I have a lot more than this, but I don't want this video to be extremely long, so I'll get the obvious one out of the way first, and that is Harry Potter. Obviously, to me, Harry Potter will always be the utmost comfort read, and I chose the third one, Prisoner of Azkaban, in this beautiful illustrated edition because I think this actually is a really nice one to read during wintertime. So it's filled with gorgeous illustrations of the scenes in here, and I chose this one in particular because of Hogsmeade. This is the first year where the students are allowed to visit Hogsmeade. Of course, Harry isn't allowed, but him being Harry, he manages to go anyway. Another series I adore and I think is really nice to reread during the Christmas time. I have actually read this particular book, or reread this particular book during Christmas before, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Personally, I think The Hobbit is a much cozier read than The Lord of the Rings. It's much quieter. I adore Bilbo Baggins and the whole cast of the dwarves. It's a much more whimsical, feel-good kind of story, which I think is perfect during this time of year. Also, I can't make this category without mentioning my favorite book of all time. That is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is a perfect, cozy read, for me at least as well, because obviously I've read it multiple times and I love every word of it. If I had to choose one book that I would reread for the rest of my life and not read anything else, it would definitely be this book. That's how much I love it. But let's move on. Another one of my favorites that I would love to reread during Christmas time, and I think is a gorgeous book during Christmas time, is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. It's one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, and this book in particular, the first one, is such a fantastic introduction to the series and to the world. Very magical, very whimsical, very funny, but very kind of dark at the same time, but I love it. And the final book or series I want to recommend in this sort of comfort category is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book, The Assassin's Apprentice. This is also an adult fantasy series, and it's the first series she wrote following Fitz and his gang, and one of my favorite series of all time. I adore the characters, I adore the writing. I only have good things to say about Robin Hobb in this series, and so definitely one of my favorite things to read ever, and yeah, something really nice to read during Christmas time. So next category I want to talk about are classics, and I'm not going to hold up any particular classic. Just in general, I would recommend reading some classics during Christmas time. Personally, I'm a big Jane Austen fan, and I always enjoy reading Jane Austen. So personally, I would recommend reading a Jane Austen book during this time of year. Like I've mentioned before, I'm personally planning on reading a Charles Dickens book around Christmas. I have not read it yet, but this is one I'll personally be reading around Christmas, and that is fittingly A Christmas Carol. But I think just in general, classics are a good choice to read around this time of year. I'm trying to avoid saying Christmas too much. Next, I want to recommend some science fiction. And I know science fiction is not necessarily the genre that instantly comes to mind when you're thinking about cozy Christmas reads, but personally, I think some science fiction can make the perfect read around Christmas, and I'm just gonna recommend a couple of them. First, I want to recommend Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I'm sure you've heard of this book. It's a very famous book, and there was a movie made after it as well, and yeah, it was one of my favorite science fiction books of all time. It's a classic for a reason, and in the theme of reading classics around Christmas, why not read a science fiction classic? Of course, in my classics category, I sort of recommended a, you know, the standard sort of classic authors like Jane Austen or Charles Dickens, but this also falls into classic. It's science fiction classic. It's a bit of a more modern classic for sure. Definitely recommend this. Other science fiction that I absolutely love and I think would be really great around Christmas is The Long Walk to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and this is a very character-driven science fiction novel that follows a big cast of characters, and I adore every single one of them. And then another of my favorite science fiction books of all time, I can't not recommend Ready Player One. I love this book, and this to me is also such an incredibly comforting book. And I know it's not to everyone's taste, and I completely understand that, but to me this is such comfort food. It's such like nerd comfort food. I love it so much. Definitely recommend this. Then I also wanted to recommend a contemporary book in this video. This one, especially to me, is a bit of a, again, sort of comforting, cozy, something that I love and that I know is good, and that I would highly recommend you guys read if you haven't already, and that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Talked about it before and I'm sure you've heard of it. Again, it has a movie adaptation. The movie is also really, really good. To me, this feels like such a warm, touching story about this guy called Charlie, and he's a freshman in high school, and he's, as the title suggests, he's a bit of a wallflower. He's a bit shy and a bit introverted. And he starts making unexpected friends in high school, and friends that are a bit older than him. And yeah, it's just such a lovely story. And then to finish it off, I'm gonna recommend some more fantasy. Surprise, surprise. The first one I want to recommend is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This book. If you haven't read The Night Circus, read The Night Circus. This is such an amazing book, and I think it would make a perfect wintertime read. This is about a magic circus that shows up out of nowhere in random places, and it's a magical circus. And then two more epic fantasy series. First, I've talked about before, this is Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. This is volume 1 of the Rhaeria Revelations. This is such a sort of quest-driven, video game-inspired fantasy novel that I love. It's so action-packed. The two main protagonists are incredible and their banter is fantastic. I love it, really funny. I have such great memories. I've read this such a long time ago, but I still remember scenes vividly from this book, and I really need to continue on the series, but I would definitely recommend the first book. And then another big fat fantasy book is Blood Song by Anthony Ryan. I just think reading a big fat fantasy book around Christmas time is the best, because obviously most people have vacation time, so you have a lot more time to really sit down and devour a really big book such as this. And I would highly recommend this book. It's incredible. I love it. If you like Game of Thrones, if you like The Name of the Wind, you will love this. It's just something really wonderful to really stick your teeth into and read through cover to cover in the Christmas holiday. That was all the books that I wanted to recommend. I'm really excited for Christmas, and I'm excited to also have a bit more free time and really sit down and read through a book in a day or something like that. I hope I've given you some recommendations for stuff that you might like to read during the holidays. If you've read any of these, do let me know what you think of them. Also do let me know what are some of your cozy read recommendations to read around Christmas time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next Monday with a new video. Bye!